There was a cartoon that I saw recently. It was two monks in cowls and habits, and they were walking down the corridor of a monastery. And one turned to the other and said, "But I am holier than thou." We have to overcome that tendency for self-importance on the spiritual path. The ego is our friend in the beginning. The teachings say that God sleeps in the minerals. He dreams in the plants. He starts to stir in the animals. And in man, he struggles to become awake. And that is our job, to become awake. That ego starts in many, many incarnations ago, and it helps us. It's like the cocoon around the butterfly or the egg around the little chick. It protects the little being that's growing to that point where finally it can break out of the cocoon, break out of the egg, and fly. And that's our job, that's our purpose, is to grow to that point where we can break free of the ego. And as devotees, we can help each other, not in the sense of, "But I am holier than thou," or "Madam, your ego is showing," but we can love each other and help each other to get past all that sense of self, referring everything back to ourselves. How does it affect me? Swami would often quote Charlotte's Web, the children's story, and one of the characters would say, "What's in it for me, Charlotte?" You know, that's the ego. What's in it for me? But fortunately, we have this beautiful path given to us by the masters of meditation and service. Meditation and service. And they aren't either or, they work together. It's a path of those two things together. The meditation helps us to expand our consciousness, expand our little ego to embrace infinity. Like the Festival of Light says, to become part of all that is, to realize our oneness with everything. And of course, in the beginning, people can meditate as a competitive sport. You know, it's possible to think my meditation is better than anybody else's or worse than anybody else's. You know, inferiority, superiority, they're sides of the same coin, ego. But that meditation, if we keep dedicated to it, if we keep running to it, knowing it's our salvation, if we keep thinking, I have to meditate, I have to be with my beloved, if we run to it like we would to a lover, then we'll start to get something out of it. Until finally, life seems like meditation, and everything else is secondary. That's what we want to have. And that's when the ego starts to blur around the edges, and it just expands to embrace infinity. And the service, the other side of that path, the service helps us, as this reading says, to see God everywhere, in everything. That's one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about climate change and the environment and the animals and all of that, humanity has this egoic thought that we're the most important thing here, and everything else is basically for us to eat. We'll just devour and consume everything. But God is equally in everything. Treat everything as that presence. The forest, the ocean, the rivers, the trees, the animals, everything. See God there. If you start having that consciousness that God is in the air in this room, He's in every single person here, He's in every atom of the floor we stand on, and everything becomes sweet. Because, as this reading says, there are endless ways in which to serve Him. We start to see Him everywhere. The program last night was so beautiful in that I saw this principle of meditation and service in everyone's face. The blessing ceremony, all the music was very meditative. It became very still. You could just feel people coming from the outwardness of chatting and food and celebration, and it just got very quiet and peaceful. And then it was over and we had to clean it all up. So it went from meditation right into activity and service, but with that meditative consciousness. And I thought, oh, that's Ananda. That's Ananda. When people are serving with that consciousness of God and peace and love for each other, that's what we're doing. It's possible to have ego, as I've said before, while you're washing the dishes and taking out the garbage. You can have just the same amount of ego as anyone ruling a country. Or you can have no ego, and you can rule a kingdom. We need to rule the kingdom of ourselves with no ego. Letting God flow through us, continually asking, God, what do you want? How can I serve you? How can I serve this yelling person who's standing in front of me? How can I give your vibration to him? And that takes deep centeredness, it takes deep trust and faith and love. But we can get there through the purification of meditation and service. I'll close with one little story that we learned in India. I've always remembered this story. I just love it. So, there was a young bride who, as is the tradition in India, went to live with her husband's family. And it was a very wealthy family, and she loved her husband. Her husband cherished her. Her new in-laws gave her anything she would possibly want. They adored her. And she was very happy there. It was a beautiful family. One day, her own parents came to visit her. And as the whole family, husband, in-laws, everyone were seated around, her mother, thinking basically this was a rhetorical question, said to her daughter, "So, my dear, how are they treating you?" And the mother thought, okay, this would be a great time for my daughter to express her appreciation for how well treated she is. And the daughter said, "Mother, they give me stale food to eat. You can imagine what an uproar this caused. The servant who was bringing the tea in dropped the tray of dishes. The mother-in-law dropped her teacup. There was just this stunned, aghast stare at the young woman. "We give you everything, my dear," they said to her. "How can you possibly think that we give you stale food?" And the young woman very calmly said to them, "You have enormous wealth given to you through your good karma from the past. That good karma was created by serving others, by doing good deeds. But that energy is stale. You've reaped the benefits of that. What good works and what good service are you doing today for mankind? How are you helping to serve people now?" And they took this to heart and they changed their ways. This beautiful passage from the Gita, I wanted to just read the rest of this passage. This first part you've heard. "One who beholds my presence everywhere and all things dwelling equally in me, he never loses sight, he never loses loving sight of me, nor I of him through all eternity." And this is the rest. "That yogi finds security in me, who, though his days be rushed and action-filled," does that sound familiar? "Whose days are rushed and action-filled, is anchored inwardly at rest in me, and worships me in every living form. That one, Arjuna, is the best of men, and truest he of yogis, whose heart feels the joys of all, their pains, their searing griefs, with equal care as though they were his own." Their searing griefs as though they were his own. Let us resolve to serve, to give, to love, and to ease the searing griefs of all.
What is the question that is at the heart of your life? The song that I sang at the beginning of service, "Where Has My Love Gone?" We could look at that as the song that Swamiji's life began with. Where has my love gone? Because he had experienced divine love in other lifetimes, and all his life he was looking for it. As a child, he would go into a kind of ecstasy under a table, just looking at the color passing through the colored tablecloth around the outside of the table. Colors themselves would take him into another world, another state. He was remembering the astral worlds that he had come from. And that song asks a question that every soul is asking: where has my love gone? And it talks about earth-searing pain, just as this reading does. And there is no answer to that question until we become the answer, until we've lived the question and become the answer. The song that Chaitanya will sing in a few minutes is, in a sense, the sequel to the song that I sang, which is another reason that I wanted to do it in that order. Because Love as a Magician is in a sense, the fulfillment of Swamiji's life. And that may sound strange because the song ends with a line that would seem to indicate otherwise. The song ends with the words, "What a fool was I to turn away." And so you would think, oh, well, that means that's the summation. Oh, he turned away. No, that's what he had done. That's what we've all done through incarnations. We've turned away from the light, from the love, from the opportunity that was in front of us to serve, to meditate, to experience God's presence. And we come to the point where we're just not going to turn away again. And practicing the presence of God, or living, as the title of the reading is, living in the presence of God, is a moment-to-moment, day-to-day thing. In another era, one of the ways that saints were made, or recognized, perhaps is a better word to say, is that they gave their lives up for their faith. They were killed because they wouldn't renounce their faith, which is to say that they lived the last few hours, or maybe the last few minutes of their life, and they stuck to their principles, and that was the end. In this era, we are called to a deeper level of commitment. And you may think, good grief, what does it take? I'm not giving my life up isn't enough. We are called to actually give our lives, not our death, but our life. And Swamiji, in his life, and Master before him, and all the great ones, have done that. And we may think, and this is where I'll pick up what Nirmala was saying about the ego, we may think, oh, but if I give away my life in service, then I don't have my life. It's no longer mine. I will no longer enjoy my life. I will no longer have that sense of fulfillment that my soul craves. But in fact, what we find is that everything that is offered sincerely at the feet of the divine comes back to us 1,000-fold, 1,000,000-fold. It may take its own time in doing so, but that is how we get past eating stale food in our own lives, as Nirmala was telling that story. Because old karma, old good karma even, is still sort of old. It has to be, we have to make that offering fresh each day. I was saying this last night. It has to be proven. The ecstatic visions that we have in meditation, assuming we have ecstatic visions in meditation, and we may subhead that with, wouldn't it be nice, or gee, maybe someday when. But even the blissful feeling of peace that comes to us at some point when we feel very inward and very still, that still has to become manifest in some kind of outward service. Very rare are those who have sort of done all the service part and can soar, can grow on the inward side. For most of us, the inward side is a balance to all the outward activity that we have to do. Hence the reading that Nirmala was sharing, the second part of the Bhagavad Gita reading, talking about how even in the midst of great activity, we never lose sight of the divine. That is how we can offer ourselves in service, because we never lose sight of the bliss that we're serving, the joy, the God, the guru, the humanity that we're serving. When we can see God in every single person, God is never far away. Think of how many times in our lives we feel removed from God. We feel removed from our own potential, from our own centeredness, from our own life, our own real life. And yet, it's staring us in the face. We have to learn to open our eyes and recognize it. We have to open our eyes and look for it. But that blissful presence is always within and around us. And love indeed is a magician. It transforms all the parts of ourselves that we may think are brutal and old and limited and whatever, and shows them in the context of the divine light. in these days leading up to Christmas, we celebrate the consciousness of Christ that lives inside of us and that lives in really all the world around us. And in these days, and especially in the meditations that are coming, one of them this coming Saturday and the next, the traditional one the following Friday, the 23rd, if you can come, come. If you can't come, at least honor the spirit of the day. Whether you're present physically or not, honor that energy because it is rare in this world. If we look around us in this world, and this world includes India too, by the way. India is a wonderful place, and we lived there for many years and have nothing but wonderful things to say about it. But it's part of this world, and there's an awful lot of outward activity going on in India that is not necessarily all that God-oriented. All of us have to learn to see the centeredness, the stillness. We have to see the opportunity. One of the things that I loved about India is that this family that Nirmala described in the story was a bit unusual in the sense that society expects in India that if you are wealthy, you have to give. You have to share that wealth in an uplifting way with society. You have to do something that will uplift society. And Swamiji showed us this as well. He came into this lifetime in a wealthy family. He traveled across the ocean. He started traveling when he was 6 months old. He was on a ship crossing the Atlantic Ocean. You know, his life was one of travel and service. And it wasn't that he was wealthy his entire life. There was a time when he lived on $10 a month and did quite famously well. He was happy to tell the story of how wealthy he felt, even though he was living on $10 a month. This was back in the days when $10 was worth a little more than it is now. $10 hardly gets you through Starbucks sometimes these days, but in that era he could manage for a month. This was 1962 or 1963 in Arizona. But he had wealth on the inside. He had that sense of abundance on the inside. And so Master could ask him inwardly, go start a World Brotherhood colony. Start it out of scratch. Start it out of the red dirt that's up in Northern California. Actually, he tried to start it in India, but he wasn't able to. It's an interesting footnote to Master trying to start a World Brotherhood colony in Encinitas, because he also had not been able to bring it to fruition. He started it, but the culture didn't support it. Swamiji started it, and the karma didn't support it. And I have to say, I don't know that the culture would have supported it then either. I think it would have turned into an ashram, a beautiful ashram with Swami at the center of it, but he would have always been striving for more. He would have always been striving for a broader sense of vision. And the challenge of doing that is no small thing. One has to say, oh, well, my life is not my own life. My life is to give to God. My life is to serve the broader humanity with. And I will work for that broader humanity. I will not carve out the time of my day or the time of my year and say, oh, well, this is mine. Oh, but I have to put it away for my retirement. No, there was no retirement for Swamiji. He was marching along all the way until he was ready to leave the body. He was answering emails into the last hour of his life. His life was a gift to everyone, and he saw that as no sacrifice at all, because it was the movement of God's joy coming through his heart. And if we think of our own lives and think, when does God's joy move my heart in such a way that I must give that and share it with others? We may think, oh, geez, been a while since I've had God's joy move through my heart in such a way. But we can prime that pump, and meditation helps us to prime that pump. We can do it in lots of other ways too, but meditation is one of the clearest and surest ways to do that. So in this season, let's us prime that pump and get that joy to flow through our hearts in such a way that we have to help others feel that joy. And they will And they do to the extent that we ourselves deeply feel it. It's one of these, we hear the term virus, computer virus, or, the latest flu that's going around. God knows, they try to get the origin of these things back to some chicken in China somewhere. It's like the flu that came from some swine or from something, it's like it's always got to have this really icky origin. What is the virus of joy? Swamiji in one of the songs that he wrote said, joy will be our gun. Joy will be shots not of anger. Joy will be our gun. Joy will be that which spreads contagiously. When a video goes viral, it means that all of a sudden word got around and it started to kind of cascade, and suddenly there's millions of people who've seen that video. Well, let us have millions of people who feel the joy that we feel. The joy that we feel from God in meditation, yes, but the joy that inexorably flows through us in everyday life, in whatever way God is calling us to live the life that we have. Let us share that joy with those around us. And this season will be deep with blessing that not only fills these few weeks out of a year, but also fills all of our lives.